Chapter 17. Ahithophel then said to Absalom,
Please, let me choose 12,000 men and rise up and chase after David tonight. I will come upon him when he is weary and powerless, and I will throw him into a panic, and all the people who are with him will flee, and I will strike down only the king. Then I will bring all the people back to you. The return of all the people depends on what happens with the man you are seeking. Then all the people will be at peace.
The proposal was just right in the eyes of Absalom and all the elders of Israel. However, Absalom said,
Please call Hushai the Archite as well, and let us hear what he has to say.
So Hushai came into Absalom. Then Absalom said to him,
This is the advice Ahithophel gave. Should we act on his advice? If not, you tell us.
At this Hushai said to Absalom,
The advice that Ahithophel gave is not good in this instance.
Hushai continued,
You well know that your father and his men are mighty, and they are desperate, like a bear that has lost her cubs in the field. Moreover, your father is a warrior, and he will not spend the night with the people. At this very moment, he is hiding in one of the caves or in some other place. And if he attacks first, those hearing of it will say, The people following Absalom have been defeated. Even the courageous man, whose heart is like that of a lion, will surely melt in fear. For all Israel knows that your father is a mighty man, and that the men with him are courageous. I give this advice. Let all Israel be gathered to you, from Dan to Beersheba, as many as the grains of sand by the sea, and you should lead them into the fight. We will come against him wherever he is found, and we will come upon him just like the dew that falls on the ground. And not one of them will survive, not he nor any of the men with him. If he retreats into a city, all Israel will carry ropes to that city, and we will drag it down into the valley until not even a pebble is left.
Then Absalom and all the men of Israel said,
The advice of Hushai the Archite is better than the advice of Ahithophel.
For Jehovah had determined to frustrate the sound advice of Ahithophel, so that Jehovah could bring disaster on Absalom. Hushai later said to Zadok and Abiathar the priests,
This is what Ahithophel has advised Absalom and the elders of Israel, and this is what I have advised. Now quickly send word to David and warn him. Do not stay at the fords of the wilderness tonight, but cross over without fail, or the king and all the people with him may be wiped out.
Jonathan and Ahimaaz were staying at En-Rogel. So a servant girl went off and told them, and they went to tell King David, for they did not dare to be seen entering the city. However, a young man saw them and told Absalom. So the two of them quickly went off and came to the house of a man in Bahurim who had a well in his courtyard. They went down into it, and the man's wife spread a covering over the top of the well and covered it with cracked grain. No one knew about it. The servants of Absalom came to the woman at her house and asked,
Where are Ahimaaz and Jonathan?
The woman replied,
They passed by toward the water.
Then the men searched for them but did not find them, so they returned to Jerusalem. After the men were gone, they came up out of the well and went and informed King David. They said to him,
Rise up and quickly cross the water, for this is what Ahithophel advised against you.
Immediately David and all the people with him rose up and crossed the Jordan. By daybreak there was no one left who had not crossed the Jordan. When Ahithophel saw that his advice had not been acted on, he saddled a donkey and went to his house in his hometown. After he gave instructions to his household, he hanged himself. So he died and was buried in the burial place of his forefathers. Meanwhile, David went to Mahanaim, and Absalom crossed the Jordan with all the men of Israel. Absalom put Amasa in charge of the army in place of Joab. Amasa was the son of a man named Ithra, the Israelite, who had relations with Abigail, the daughter of Nahash, the sister of Zeruiah, Joab's mother. Israel and Absalom camped in the land of Gilead. As soon as David came to Mahanaim, Shobai the son of Nahash from Rabbah of the Ammonites, Machir the son of Amiel from Lodebar, and Barzillai the Gileadite from Rogelim brought beds, basins, clay pots, wheat, barley, flour, roasted grain, broad beans, lentils, parched grain, honey, butter, sheep, and cheese. They brought all of this out for David and the people with him to eat. For they said,
"The people are hungry and tired and thirsty in the wilderness."
Chapter 15. After all these things, Absalom acquired for himself a chariot and horses and 50 men to run before him. Absalom would rise up early and stand at the side of the road to the city gate. Whenever any man had a legal case that was to come to the king for judgment, Absalom would call him and say,
"From what city are you?"
And he would say,
Your servant is from one of the tribes of Israel.
Absalom would say to him,
"See, your claims are right and proper, but there is no one from the king to hear your case."
Absalom would say,
"If only I were appointed judge in the land, then every man who has a legal case or judgment could come to me, and I would see that he receives justice."
And when a man came near to bow down to him, Absalom would extend his hand and grab hold of him and kiss him. Absalom would do this to all the Israelites who would come into the king for judgment. So Absalom kept stealing the hearts of the men of Israel. At the end of 4 years, Absalom said to the king,
"Let me go, please, to Hebron, to pay my vow that I made to Jehovah. For your servant made this solemn vow when I was dwelling in Geshur in Syria. If Jehovah will bring me back to Jerusalem, I will make an offering to Jehovah."
So the king said to him,
"Go in peace."
With that he rose up and went to Hebron. Absalom now sent spies through all the tribes of Israel, saying,
"As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, announce, Absalom has become king in Hebron."
Now 200 men from Jerusalem had gone there with Absalom. They were invited and went unsuspectingly, unaware of what was happening. Further, when he offered the sacrifices, Absalom sent for Ahithophel the Gilonite, David's advisor, from his city Gilo. The conspiracy kept gaining momentum, and the people who supported Absalom were growing in number. In time, an informer came to David, saying,
"The heart of the men of Israel has turned to Absalom."
At once David said to all his servants with him in Jerusalem,
"Get up and let us run away, for none of us will escape from Absalom. Hurry, for fear he may quickly overtake us and bring disaster on us and strike the city with the sword."
The king's servants replied to the king,
"Whatever my lord the king decides, your servants are ready to do."
So the king went out with all his household following him. But the king left 10 concubines to take care of the house. And the king continued on his way out with all the people following, and they stopped at Beth-merhak. All his servants leaving with him, and all the Kerethites, the Pelethites, and the Gittites, 600 men who had followed him from Gath, were passing by as the king reviewed them. Then the king said to Ittai the Gittite,
"Why should you also go with us? Go back and dwell with the new king, for you are a foreigner and also an exile from your place. Yesterday you came, so today should I make you wander with us, to go when I must go and where I must go? Go back and take your brothers with you, and may Jehovah show you loyal love and faithfulness."
But Ittai answered the king,
"As surely as Jehovah is living, and as surely as my lord the king is living, wherever my lord the king may be, whether for death or for life, there your servant will be."
At that David said to Ittai,
"Go and cross over."
So Ittai the Gittite crossed over, together with all his men and children. Everyone in the land was weeping loudly, while all these people crossed over. And the king was standing by the Kidron Valley. All the people were crossing over to the road leading to the wilderness. Zadok was also there, and with him were all the Levites carrying the ark of the covenant of the true God. And they set the ark of the true God down, and Abiathar went up, while all the people completed crossing over from the city. But the king said to Zadok,
"Take the ark of the true God back to the city. If I find favor in the eyes of Jehovah, he will also bring me back and let me see it and its dwelling place. But if he should say, 'I have found no pleasure in you,' then let him do to me whatever seems good in his eyes."
The king said to Zadok the priest,
"Are you not a seer? Return to the city in peace, and take the 2 sons of you men with you, Ahimaaz your own son, and Jonathan the son of Abiathar. See, I will linger by the fords of the wilderness until word comes from you to inform me."
So Zadok and Abiathar took the ark of the true God back to Jerusalem, and they remained there. As David was going up the Mount of Olives, he was weeping as he went up. His head was covered, and he was walking barefoot. All the people with him also covered their heads, and were weeping as they went up. David was then told,
"Ahithophel is among those conspiring with Absalom."
At this David said,
"Turn, please, the advice of Ahithophel into foolishness, O Jehovah."
When David came to the summit where people used to bow down to God, Hushai the Archite was there to meet him, with his robe ripped apart and dirt on his head. However, David said to him,
"If you go across with me, you will be a load on me. But if you return to the city, and you say to Absalom, 'I am your servant, O king. I was the servant of your father in the past, but now I am your servant,' you can then frustrate the advice of Ahithophel for me. Are not Zadok and Abiathar the priests there with you? You must tell Zadok and Abiathar the priests everything that you hear from the house of the king. Look, there with them are their 2 sons, Ahimaaz the son of Zadok, and Jonathan the son of Abiathar, and through them send to me everything that you hear."
So Hushai, David's friend, went into the city as Absalom was entering into Jerusalem. Chapter 16. When David had passed a little beyond the summit, Ziba, the attendant of Mephibosheth, was there to meet him with a couple of saddled donkeys, and on them were 200 loaves of bread, 100 cakes of raisins, 100 cakes of summer fruit, and a large jar of wine. Then the king said to Ziba,
"Why have you brought these things?"
Ziba replied,
"The donkeys are for the household of the king to ride. The bread and the summer fruit are for the young men to eat, and the wine is for those who get exhausted in the wilderness to drink."
The king now said,
"And where is the son of your master?"
At this Ziba said to the king,
"He is staying in Jerusalem, for he said, 'Today the house of Israel will give back the royal rule of my father to me.'"
The king then said to Ziba,
"Look, everything that belongs to Mephibosheth is yours."
Ziba replied,
"I bow down before you. May I find favor in your eyes, my lord the king."
When King David reached Bahurim, a man of the family of Saul's house named Shimei, the son of Gera, came out shouting curses as he approached. He was throwing stones at David and at all the servants of King David, as well as at all the people and the mighty men on his right and on his left. Shimei said as he cursed,
"Get out! Get out, you blood-guilty man! You worthless man! Jehovah has brought back on you all the blood guilt for the house of Saul, in whose place you have ruled as king. But Jehovah gives the kingship into the hand of Absalom your son. Now calamity has overtaken you, because you are a blood-guilty man."
Then Abishai the son of Zeruiah said to the king,
Why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Let me go over, please, and take off his head.
But the king said,
What do I have to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah? Let him curse me, for Jehovah has said to him, Curse David. So who should say, Why are you doing this?
David then said to Abishai and all his servants,
Here my own son, who came from my own body, is seeking my life. And how much more now a Benjaminite? Leave him alone, so that he may curse me, for Jehovah told him to. Perhaps Jehovah will see my affliction, and Jehovah will restore goodness to me instead of the curses shouted at me this day.
With that, David and his men kept going down the road while Shimei was walking alongside the mountain abreast of him, shouting curses and throwing stones and a lot of dust. At length the king and all the people with him arrived at their destination exhausted, and they refreshed themselves. Meanwhile, Absalom and all the men of Israel arrived in Jerusalem, and Ahithophel was with him. When Hushai the Archite, David's friend, came into Absalom, Hushai said to Absalom,
Long live the king! Long live the king!
At this Absalom said to Hushai,
Is this your loyal love toward your friend? Why did you not go with your friend?
So Hushai said to Absalom,
No, I am on the side of the one who has been chosen by Jehovah, this people, and all the men of Israel. I will stay with him. And again I say, whom should I serve? Should it not be his son? Just as I served your father, so I will serve you.
Absalom then said to Ahithophel,
Give me your advice. What should we do?
At that Ahithophel said to Absalom,
Have relations with your father's concubines, those whom he left behind to take care of the house. Then all Israel will hear that you have made yourself a stench to your father, and those who support you will be strengthened.
So they pitched a tent for Absalom on the roof, and Absalom had relations with the concubines of his father before the eyes of all Israel. In those days, the advice that Ahithophel gave was considered as the word of the true God. That was how all the advice of Ahithophel was esteemed, both by David and by Absalom.